Hello, hello. Welcome to the DFS Build Sunday Night Football Showdown edition. We're going to go over the Chiefs and the Chargers game. Big game for real life purposes. Chargers want to keep winning to actually make sure they get a playoff spot, and I guess this would be their last chance to have a shot at the AFC West title. So, yeah, big implications for sure. Not exactly the most exciting game for DFS purposes. It only has a total of 44, but it is 43, sorry, but it is a tightly contested matchup in terms of betting line. It has a 4-point spread, so it's supposed to be close, supposed to be relatively low scoring. Yeah, but we're going to go over it and see what looks good for the showdown. Last time out for the Thursday Night Football Showdown slate, I loved Christian Watson in the captain. He should have had a touchdown. It didn't work out. He was not the guy. Josh Jacobs was the guy with 3 touchdowns. I still had Josh Jacobs in my lineups. I still said he was a fine play. But I did not have him on my radar as a captain just because the Lions have a really, really good run defense. That just wasn't the way I wanted to attack that slate. But if you played Christian Watson, you weren't sad about it. He still had a considerable amount of points, and he almost was a mega hit. But onward and upward we go. My goal is to help you win. I'm going to go over these plays just the way I would play them, and hopefully it helps you out. If it does, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. I push this content out for free. Hopefully you appreciate it, and more than anything, hopefully it helps you out. And if it does, all I ask is you return the favor of hitting that subscribe and join the community. Anytime you have a question, drop it in the comments. And anytime you have a big win, let us know about that too. All right, let's get to it. Usually I have ownership here to work with, and we can just kind of work from the captain spot, and I can talk about what captain plays I like and what captain plays might be floating under the radar that, look good. So we don't have that, so we can kind of just go logically and look at some of the top options. So obviously the guys that are going to be the most owned, most likely, are going to be Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and Travis Kelce. They come in with the 3 best projections at the captain spot. Let me actually order this by projections. And there's not even that many guys with a projection over 10 fantasy points in the first place. So this is certainly a place where I wouldn't really mind eating some of the chalk here. And I think the best chalk to eat would be Kelce. The matchup for the Chargers is not like super friendly or anything. Chargers are actually very, very good against tight ends, but he knows the Chargers pretty well, and it is a huge game for both sides, and he's at home. So I think it'll be okay. I don't have a problem with that. And especially if that's going to bring his bring his ownership down for any reason, then I will gladly go to him. I mean, last time against the Chargers, he had 7 catches on 9 targets for 89 yards, 15 fantasy points. That will do in a game like this. Then if he finds the end zone, he's just going to absolutely smash. So we don't have ownership or anything, but Kelce looks good. Mahomes looks good. I would imagine, Herbert's going to be lower owned than Mahomes and the captain too. Herbert looks good as well. He was pretty quiet last week in the smash spot against the Falcons. 7 fantasy points. I loved him. It just did not work out. But honestly, he's been pretty good overall on the year. I mean, really has been picking up lately. He's had 17 plus fantasy points and hit in 6 straight games leading into that dud on the road against the Falcons. But the reality is they just didn't need him. I mean, he played well and he helped Lad McConkey have a massive game. But they just didn't really need him in a 17-13 win where Kirk Cousins just kept throwing picks, and they just played battle of field position and ended up winning. So this is obviously a much bigger game. I think he's probably going to be playing from behind in this one. We'll have to throw it a little bit more, and we do know he is a dynamic player. He can get it done on the ground with his legs. So I think Herbert is very interesting in the captain as well. One guy we might be able to go back to here and get a little bit more contrarian would be Nuke. DeAndre Hopkins, 9 targets last game, 6 plus targets in each of his last 2 games, had a touchdown 2 games ago. So he has 13 plus fantasy points in each of his last 2 games, staying pretty involved. So if you don't like Kelce in the captain, I think Nuke is not the worst pivot. He is expensive, and his floor is not that high, and his ceiling seems to be somewhat limited at the moment. But I think that's also going to play into the ownership going down a little bit. So I do like him a good deal. Isaiah Pacheco is back. He had 7 carries, 8 overall touches in his first game back. He's just going to keep eating into Kareem Hunt's workload. If you're going to play a Chiefs running back, it's going to be Pacheco at this point. Obviously, Kareem Hunt can fall into the end zone, and he still would probably get about 10 touches, I would imagine. But he's 9.6K. So Kareem Hunt is off my radar in this game. Not super excited to pay 12K for Isaiah Pacheco. The Chargers on the year, at least in the last 4 weeks, they've not been great against fantasy running backs, bottom 10. So I might lean into that a little bit and get to Pacheco. Certainly between the two, he's the one I'm looking at. But at 12K, I think he's more of a flex play for me anyways. as far the Chargers backfield, obviously J.K. Dobbins remains out, so we're looking at Gus Edwards and Kimani Vidal and Hassan Haskins. Hassan Haskins had 1 carry last game. Vidal, let's find him real quick here. He had 4 carries last game, and Gus Edwards had 6 carries last game. I think that is all the guys that were really featured. Let me just check. I'm kind of just making sure nobody did anything else. Yeah, they didn't. So that's really the only guys. And like, that's pretty gross for a game that was close and they were winning it too last week. So don't really love that, especially they were on the turf in Atlanta. You'd think they'd have a little bit more success. So it's just a 3-headed horse. It doesn't feel good. I think if you're going to play one, it's going to be Gus Edwards. He's just going to get more touches. But at 11.1K, I do not really like him in the captain. I just think that's paying a lot for what amounts to a pretty modest role at the moment. I think he's a fine flex play. Let's see, over in the flex, he is not. He's 7.4K. That's okay. If you want to take a shot at one of the other guys that will be getting touches behind him, I think right now Haskins would be not really on my radar just because he had 1 touch last game. So I think I'd look at Kimani and Vidal and give him a shot. His price is 4.2K in the captain. I just don't think he's really captain worthy. I just don't really see the ceiling there. But if you're going to take a shot at one of them in captain, he would be the one. And I do think he is a solid try in the flex as well. As far as these other guys who are carrying good projection, Will Dissly stands out with almost an 11-point fantasy projection. He's pretty cheap, honestly, too, at only 7.2K in the captain. I like him a lot in the captain. A couple of reasons why. Number one, recency bias. He only had 1 target for 0 catches last week, so people are going to very much be souring on him. And, rightfully so. He was in a good spot, and he just failed miserably. But every Charger, except for Ladd McConkey, failed miserably, so I'm not going to hold it against him. He's really cheap in the captain, even better in the flex. He had been super involved, 4+ targets in each of his last 3 previous games. Does not have a massive ceiling, but he did have 18 fantasy points 3 games ago, and he's at 8+ fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games now. Most importantly, though, the Chiefs are a really good matchup for Chargers or for tight ends. They're bottom 15 team against tight ends in the last 4 weeks, and on the year they are 3rd worst against fantasy tight ends, giving up 104 targets and 942 yards to the position. So yeah, sign me up for some Dissly. That is even more so going to be the case for me if Ladd McConkey is out. Ladd McConkey is dealing with an ailment. He's dealing with a knee and shoulder injuries. So, I mean, obviously, if McConkey is in, McConkey is one of the best captain plays on the board, whether you're looking at ceiling or floor. McConkey's been awesome. The matchup is not good, obviously, but if you're going to attack the Chiefs, it's through the air. On the year, they're way worse against wide receivers than running backs. We saw Trey Tucker bust off a 58-yard catch and touchdown against them last week. Just we've seen people have success with them against the air, and if the Chargers are trailing, it just makes sense that some of their wide receivers are going to have some success here, just based off of necessity, right? So while McConkey is not healthy and he's expensive, he has popped off for 21 fantasy points or more in 2 of his last 3 games, and he's had 14+ fantasy points in 3 straight. I mean, he has a 32-point fantasy outing on the year. McConkey looks awesome. Just make sure he's in. If McConkey is out, though, obviously, like I said, Dissly looks a little bit more appealing, and then we can start looking at really nice captain punts like Quentin Johnston. Feels gross, but guess what? Quentin Johnston still has a role. Nobody else besides McConkey found much success last week because the Chargers just weren't really forcing it. They weren't forcing the issue offensively, but he still had 4 targets. He had 2 catches last week. 2 games ago, he had no catches on 5 targets. And if you watch the game, if he could have just caught some of those balls, he would have some huge plays and probably a couple touchdowns. They want to get him going. They want him to have success. He's a big bodied dude who can be a major factor in the red zone, major factor deep down the field, very athletic, very explosive. If he just simply catches any pass anywhere on the field, he is a threat to take it to the house. So Quentin Johnston is forever on my radar in the captain, especially since he's only 8.7K there. He's got a reasonable floor if he's actually getting volume and they're playing from behind. He's had, in the last 5 games, he's had 3 games with over 10 fantasy points. He's had 2 20+ fantasy point outings on the year, so he does have a considerable ceiling. If he's dropping passes, yes, the floor is absolutely brutal. No denying that. But in tournaments, to get very different and to get, a bit of a ceiling with a cheaper guy, I think Quentin Johnston, again, looks really, really good. He's in play for me regardless of Ladd's status. If Ladd is out, the ownership might tick up a good amount on Quentin Johnson, even though he's kind of a volatile player. But if Ladd is in, he is going to draw the focus to the KC defense quite a bit, and Quentin Johnson is just going to be more wide open. He just needs to catch the damn ball. Regardless of Ladd's status, Josh Palmer is also going to factor into the equation. He's even cheaper than Quentin Johnson. I feel like he's much safer than Quentin Johnson because he actually knows how to catch, but he does not have the ceiling and overall upside that Quentin Johnson possesses. Now, I would change my tune on that if Ladd is out. If Ladd is out, Palmer would basically move into the Ladd role, and he'd be featured prominently just because he's suddenly the only Chargers receiver that we can trust, right? So I think Palmer's still in play if Ladd is in. It's just more of a flex option for me. I think you can still sprinkle him into the captain at only 8.1K. Just I would rather do QJ there for sure. Other guys, you have Juju Smith-Schuster for the Chiefs, Justin Watson for the Chiefs. Do I feel great about them? No, they're kind of just the same dudes. Either of them can score a touchdown or get like 5+ catches out of nowhere because the Chiefs do spread the ball around a little bit. But it's just, you're just taking a chance on somebody. It's not like there's anything really concrete there that makes you feel good about it. I will say Noah Gray at 6.6K is interesting. 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games. He has 2 games with multiple touchdowns, 18 and 22 fantasy points leading into last week when he had 4 catches for 58 yards on 6 targets. So 9.8 plus fantasy points in 3 straight games. He's been very, very involved. Obviously, I mean, you can play Noah Gray and Travis Kelce together. I just think it makes a lot of sense to take a stand. Either you're going to let everybody else eat a 6.6K Noah Gray, and he's like, what, 4.4 in the flex, and you're going to play Kelce, or you're going to fade Kelce and hope Noah Gray is the one who does some stuff. But my guess is because of how much they use their tight ends, one of those dudes is going to be quite necessary on this slate. For the Chargers, depending on the Ladd McConkey news, you do have Jalen Reagor. Doesn't feel great. Darius Davis, if he's active, he is an explosive player, so there's that. DJ Chark, if he's active, he's there. I think all 3 of those guys, it's like, lightning in a bottle. If they hit, it's just like, good, congrats. Great work, dude. Because it just feels like it'd be absolute luck. If Ladd is out, there's more logic to using those guys. Like I wouldn't be opposed to that at all. A little bit of sprinkling of them in the captain, sliding them in, rotate them in flex spots, depending on, what else you're doing. I think definitely in play if McConkey's out. If McConkey's in, you're just hoping for the best and playing these guys just to get different. Like there's no real logic to it if that's the case. Yeah, so that's pretty much it there. Let's just check the projections one more time, see what else is standing out. Yeah, there is Xavier Worthy. He's been awful. The connection between him and Patrick Mahomes just has not been there whatsoever. What's his price at? He is kind of expensive at the captain, given what he's been doing. 3 games ago, he had 16 fantasy points. He has had 9+ fantasy points in each of the last 3 games. He can be used as a gadget option. As a runner, he obviously does have the ability to hit down the field. Chargers defense is not very friendly. They don't give up a lot of points, though. Not a lot of big plays either. So it's not really the spot that I love to play him at. I mean, the floor is brutal. A few games ago, he had -1 fantasy points. The game after that, he had 2. So I think at GPPs, he's interesting in the captain. Like you can definitely try it. And he's still live for the flex because he's only 7K there. It just doesn't feel like the spot that I really want to attack with Xavier Worthy. All right, so I think that does do it for the top options. Then you're looking at your kickers. Matthew Wright is taking over for the Chiefs at the moment with Harrison Butker still out with an injury. And they even lost their other guy who is replacing Butker, Spencer Schrader, so he's out too. So Matthew Wright, I think he had 13 fantasy points. Yeah, 13 and 14 fantasy points in the 2 games he's been active on the year. The last one was with the Chiefs against the Raiders. He had 14. So he's been good. The Chiefs have a solid offense that stalls a lot, so he's going to get field goal opportunities. He looks like a really good play on this slate. I have no qualms about playing him at all. Even more so, they're facing the Chargers in a division rivalry game. So I can certainly see him kicking 3+ field goals and a couple extra points and paying off really nicely. Don't think I'd captain him, but I think he's a rock solid flex play if you don't really want to play Josh Palmer in that same price range. He's $600 cheaper. That is in play. Cameron Dicker the kicker. He's been solid all year. 10.5 fantasy points per game, 12+ fantasy points each of his last 3 games. Chargers offense is a lot like the Chiefs. They are rock solid. They're balanced. and they just do enough to give Dicker opportunities. So both these kickers are in play with 10 plus fantasy point upside. Not going to captain them, but in a low total game with two solid defenses, I think they're pretty interesting flex plays. Don't think I would pair them either, but they're just solid floor, low ceiling plays. It's just the way it is when it comes to kickers. Defenses, as defenses go, both defenses are in play. It kind of depends on the narrative. Like, do you think the Chargers are going to come into KC and dominate this game? If so, you can play the Chargers thinking they'll get a bunch of sacks, pick off Mahomes, and maybe get a defensive touchdown or something. I just wouldn't put them in the captain. You can be a little bit overweight on them for sure, because right now they're not going to, I would imagine they're not going to carry any ownership as the underdog, especially when the Chiefs are projecting for almost 24 points. The Chiefs are probably the safer play, but if they're going to carry ownership, I'd gladly be underweight. And honestly, this feels like the Broncos-Browns game from Monday night last week. I think I'm just going to go against the grain and bet on this being a bit of a shootout. I mean, it's a massive game. The Chiefs want to hold on to first place in the AFC. And of course, they want to make sure the Chargers cannot have any chance of stealing the division. So they're going to show up at home. And then, the Chargers, they're going to go all out because they need and want this game as well. So overall, I mean, I think you can still go with the chalky guys if you want to in the captain, but I do want to try to get away from that a little bit. I think the biggest piece of news we need before Sunday Night Football arrives is going to be Ladd McConkey. I would imagine he plays, but the fact that he is dealing with 2 injuries makes it possible that he ends up sitting. He did get in some limited sessions, but just keep an eye on that. If Ladd is in, he looks like a really good play. And then some of these other options I talked about, they just become intriguing tournament plays that are a little bit more volatile than they would be. Will Dissly, Quentin Johnson, Josh Palmer. They're across the board. Those 3 guys are my favorite guys to captain and to flex on this slate. If Ladd is in, they're going to be less owned and still very interesting to me. But QJ, I think no matter what, is my favorite option as far as a contrarian captain on this slate. Now, if Ladd is out, QJ still looks really good, still like Will Dissly, but then Josh Palmer becomes my favorite captain play. I would be interested to see what his ownership looks like, because I would not be that shocked with no Ladd McConkey. I would imagine, the field would adapt and Palmer would be pretty chalky, just knowing that he kind of is sliding into that bigger role. And then Mahomes, Kelsey, probably how I'm attacking from the Chiefs side. I think Xavier Worthy is an okay way to do it, although, lower ownership. And then I also like DeAndre Hopkins a lot if I'm targeting this game from the Chiefs side. All right, that is going to do it for me. Hopefully this helps you out a little bit and gets you ready for Sunday Football this week. I am doing this on Friday, so I do not have that Ladd McConkey news. Just, take what I said and adapt as needed. If this helps you out in any way, smash that like button and also consider subscribing to the channel. Subscribes help you. They alert you to future videos just like this. We do NFL slates as best we can, and we do NBA every day from Monday to Friday. So if you want to catch all that stuff and get in on contests and get on community involvement, all that stuff, be sure to subscribe. And then obviously it helps us too, because it just gets us exposed a little bit more and helps us do this more too. All right, thanks for watching and good luck this week.